Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Today is September 8th. That's amazing. What a great day. It's my birthday. It's kind of cool. Sorry about last week. We didn't have a program. It was a long weekend here in Canada at the time, and a lot of stuff was going on my end. I had 3 of my kids move, one from one house to another, and then 2 of my kids moved out. So there's no children at home. Very, very strange time. Anyway, it's good to be with you this morning, and I have a really cool program for you today. This was broadcasted a couple weeks back. I was invited to be a guest on a panel of 3 other guests with Sherri Pallas of Fireside Creators, and she interviewed us on the topic of what is grace. And I got to chat with 2 really, really good buddies, Paul Gray and Bill Thrasher. Richard Murray was not able to be part of that one. I had hoped he would have. That would have been so cool too. But it was a really good discussion, and thought this is something we should probably share here on Still Growing in Grace. You already know the 2 of them. You don't know Sheri yet. I might have shared one of her programs before. I'm sure I did. But this is another one I think you're going to really love. It's a long one. It's an hour long. So if you can't finish it, come back later to finish it up. But I'm going to hit play right away and not waste too much time, because the content's what we're here to hear today, and I think you'll love it. So let me get to it and hit play. I'll be watching live with you, so I'll be seeing the comments. Feel free to say hello, tell us where you're watching from, and let's enjoy this.
Tonight's show is on grace, and we have an all-star panel to discuss it. So let me tell you a little bit about them. First, we have Paul Gray. Paul focuses on helping people experience and enjoy God's love without conditions. His message is grace is unconditional. Love is action, continually working all things for good. Paul found that knowing God personally leads to enjoying and experiencing life at a much higher level. He developed Pure Light Walker, an 8-module personal and group mentoring experience. He is the author of Convertible Conversations, The Fishnet Experience, Notes from Papa, and Grace Is. Paul's podcast, Great to All, features weekly interviews with worldwide members of the Grace Ultimate Reconciliation team. Welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a privilege.
Thank you. I think it's a privilege to have you. So thanks. It's definitely mutual.
Good. Good.
Our next guest is Mike Zenker. Mike became a pastor in 1990 and has been on the senior pastor of Hope Fellowship Community Church in Waterloo, Ontario since December of 2003. He launched Growing in Grace Ministries in Canada in 2006, which is teaching ministry focused on an identity in Christ and understanding forgiveness. Mike's life has been a journey of unlearning religion and discovering a greater grace. He serves as a fire department, long-term care, and funeral home chaplain, providing hope, love, and light to all those enduring hard times. Welcome, Mike. Good to have you back.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
And definitely last but not least, we have Bill Thrasher. Bill is the author of The Jesus Purpose, Born to Die, Created to Live. He lives in Woodstock, Georgia with his wife, Christina, son Will, daughter Ashley, and pound puppy Piper. He hosts Unleashed community gatherings, is a member of the Marine Corps League, and works with several outreach missions. For the past 20 years, he has rose through the ranks of his commercial audiovisual industry and is currently the Senior Vice President at AV Tech Media Solutions. Bill is a supernaturally gifted roller skater, enjoys attending Georgia Tech football games, listening to great music, watching Marvel movies, playing outdoors, spending quality time with his family, and living this adventure called life. Welcome, Bill.
How's it going?
You had me at roller skater.
Oh, me too.
Hey, man. When you got it, right?
Yeah,
I still have mine. I have running shoe roller skates.
I just glide. It's supernatural. It really is. I can't.
It works. That's the kind of crew I want to be with. So I was raised in the church as an evangelical and in the Assembly of God.
So sorry.
That's okay. I went to a Christian school for most of my schooling, and yet I knew nothing about grace. I knew about judgment, condemnation, hellfire, and brimstone, but grace only appeared in the song. Until a couple years ago, I said that if I get to heaven and I see Hitler, I'm going to be furious. I thought it was the ultimate form of injustice. If I worked so hard to be a good Christian girl in order to get to heaven, and someone so heinous was there too, I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I saw Nadia Bowles-Weber speak on grace, and she actually used Hitler as an example of God's grace. After some anger, denial, cognitive dissonance, my limited perception of God's love and what unconditional love really means exploded my mind. My box of limited understanding collapsed. In understanding what true grace is, it gave me something superior to man to reach for, something beyond my understanding, but pure. I removed the boundaries my humanity put on love. Paul, you say that grace is love in action, and I think that's perfect. Can you expand on that?
Well, God is love, and God continually is working all things for the good. He's continually blessing all of us. I love the Passion translation of Galatians 5:22, which says correctly, in my opinion, that the fruit of the Spirit is God's agape, unconditional love, in all its many expressions, there, and then joy, peace, patience. So everything that God does flows from who God is, God's unconditional love. And his grace, God's grace, is just simply God's goodness flowing out from God all the time, flowing out from in us, because that's where God is, and then flowing out of us into everyone else. It's just continually in action for a purpose to bless us and to bless other people through us, and working towards the ultimate reconciliation of all people.
Well, I've said for years that, it's really easy to love when things are good. And when things are bad, it's more difficult. Like if you get run off the road, I am a total road rager, right? And
I could never see that.
But that is love in action. To not flip off the driver, to not yell at your boss when they pick someone else over you, and that's grace, right? I mean, I've always said love is a verb. But in using that, that's when you accept the grace. Bill, what do you have to say?
No, I agree with everything that Paul says there. And grace is this concept that I don't know that we as finite humans currently existing in this world of cause and effect, right? We can use other words for cause and effect. We can call it karma. You can call it quid pro quo. You can call it any, some of these words. We can't really understand grace. We can only experience it in moments and in morsels, if that's kind of makes sense. Grace is such a big concept to try and wrap our hearts around, because everything that we have in this world is, I do this and this is a consequence. And grace is free from that paradigm. It really is. And one of the things I wrote down when Paul was talking about is action. Another word for action is energy, right? God, energy, these are all synonymous, but there's two types of energy in our world. You have potential energy, which is energy that has not manifested into action yet. And you have kinetic energy, which is energy in flow. And I think that grace is the same thing, or love is the same thing, I should say. Energy in flow, or love in flow, is that experience, that tidal wave of grace that we can get on our surfboard and ride, but potential grace is always there. It's always wrapped up. It's always hidden. It may be shadowed. It may not be exposed yet, but that's the hope we have, right? The hope we have is that all things have been permeated with grace. All things have been permeated with love, and it just hasn't manifested from potential into action or actuality yet.
Well, and I think that, I always say, if you want God there, bring in love. So,
right.
People, atheists like to say, why isn't God saving the babies who die? And my retort to that is because it's on us. We are to be there to comfort, to heal. And that's how we walk in God. That's how we walk in love.
You become that action. Yeah,
exactly. Some people twist it and use that action for violence, and that's a lack of grace. That's the judgment. And isn't judgment the antithesis of grace, Mike?
It's like disgrace.
Yeah.
Right. So if it ain't grace, it's disgrace. So I get all caught up now with memes or messages I see of people trying to say, hey, this is what grace actually means. And then when they use the word actual, they're implying they know more than everyone else. So I would want to dial it back and say, hey, there's a mystery about understanding what grace is. Where are we getting this word from? Look up its root word. Find out where it's most talked about. And yes, it's found in the Bible a lot. And even there's some great ways to understand what grace is. And the simplest form I've ever seen is grace is a person. Now, people barked on me for saying that. So we'll prove that. Show me in the Bible where it is that. Whatever. But the essence of everything I see is this kindness is personified. That's really another expression of what grace is. So with that, there is no judgment. So when you got lots of judgment going on, there ain't grace.
Well, I think that's why I was never taught about grace, because all I was taught about was judgment.
Well, yeah, because they're professionals at that.
Yeah. It's hellfire, brimstone, you're going to hell, Jesus is returning, Armageddon.
It's controllable.
Even Armageddon is the antithesis of grace, right? Because that means that half of the world is going to be doomed to hell, and the other half is going. That's judgment there too.
Well, and to simplify, maybe Paul want to chime in on this. I think to simplify, because Paul actually gives us kind of the formula of grace and what is its most root essence opposite, right? Sometimes I think there is really a good conversation that flows from understanding the opposite of something. And when you talk about love, the opposite is
apathy, actually.
Fear.
Apathy.
Fear is the opposite of love, right? Because perfect love casts out all fear.
Okay.
So fear is really the unexpected opposite of love. The opposite of grace, as Paul talks about, maybe both Pauls, is law. Law is the opposite of whenever we put conditions, policy, procedure, anything that brings condemnation and ultimately conviction, legally speaking, right? That is where we get into this bind of judgment, just like you said. So it's attached to judgment. Judgment means crisis. It's the moment of friction that happens when law and mercy or condemnation and mercy are pitted against each other. And we have to choose, what do we believe God is rooted in, fear or love, law or grace? And these are the opportunities we have to kind of shake this out.
You guys have said different things that remind. I can give you the definition of grace in one word: squirrel.
Do you have ADHD?
When I was in Sunday school, and I might have you beat, Mike. I don't know. I had 18 years perfect attendance, and our abomination, that was expected. But at any rate, one day I was like in the 5th or 6th grade or something like that, and the teacher said, "Well, we're just got the flannel grant and everything," and she says, "We're going to do an object lesson today," and she says, "Okay, kids, what's about 14, 16 inches long. It's kind of reddish brown. It's got a long tail, 4 little feet. It's brownish red. It stores up nuts in the winter. What is that? And I raised my hand. She called on me. She said, what is it? And I said, well, it's Jesus. I mean, every question you ask, the answer is Jesus. I mean, it sounds like a squirrel, but it's Jesus. So Grace is a squirrel. Grace is Jesus personified, who is in us. You look at Jesus' actions and what he's like.
Look at all the nuts he collected.
Yeah. Look at his actions and look at his actions and the way he lived. I mean, Jesus. To me, Jesus is grace. Now, I can give you scripture references for that, but I'm not into that anymore. So that'll cost extra, but with my tip jar. But Jesus is grace personified.
There's no condemnation. There's no condemnation, right?
Yeah, I even today I call the Father Papa. I call Jesus, and these days I call the Holy Spirit Grace. The Holy Spirit of Jesus is in us, and I like to call her Grace. So she hadn't slapped me yet for that. So,
well, Grace wouldn't slap you, right? Isn't that the whole point?
Right. Have I opened up several can of worms already?
Well, I want to follow up with the squirrel because I've actually used the squirrel as a metaphor throughout my life. Whenever I was really afraid, I would think that even the squirrels are provided for. Everything will work out.
Yeah.
And that is one thing. I mean, I don't see how you tied the squirrel in with Jesus, but I'll let you run with that. I wanted to follow up with what Bill said, though, because it is, if you're, I mean, that is what Jesus said, was that you to have love instead of law.
Yeah. Yeah, and every time you guys say squirrel, all I can think is the movie Up, and I just want to go.
Yeah, exactly. Distraction. It's just a squirrel. Maybe we'll find out a little bit what that meant.
Mike thought we were.
Once we start to understand that grace, getting mildly, is this person Jesus? Then not to make people feel so uncomfortable with. I mean, you're talking to 3 Jesus guys. You just are. I know these 2 gentlemen very well, and we just see that this embodiment, this incarnation of what we see as perfect love, right, reveals something about this cosmos and about who we are and who God is, all simultaneously. And if that's true, that this image of God is on a cross, right, and forgiving all humanity, drawing all creation into himself, never counting trespasses against anyone ever. And that is the essence of love. That is the essence of action to love, grace. Then, I mean, what else could we want? More could we want in our understanding of what we define as God, like loosely define as God, using that word or any other word, right?
I heard a guy named Judah Smith. He said, grace is illogical. It's counterintuitive. Can't be contextualized. That's brilliant. Just so we don't get hung up on a narrow box definition. I think the mystery of grace points to a greater love and a greater acceptance and inclusion of all humanity.
Yeah.
Well, and that's when Nadia Bolz-Weber was talking about with Hitler. Mm-hmm. And she said that powerful of grace would see the pain, would see the atrocities that made him the way he was, like a mother to their child, forgiving and loving and trying to heal. And like I said, that concept was completely foreign to me. I had lived with, if Hitler's there, I'm going to be pissed. But when she laid it out that way to say this is beyond your understanding and that's the point, that did blow the box up for me. Yeah. That was like, all of a sudden, all of my judgment was needed to be examined because, if it's my judgment, that doesn't mean that it's holy judgment. That doesn't mean it's righteous judgment. It's my human judgment. And terrorism is in the eye of the beholder, hurt is in the eye, all of those things. But when you have grace, it is beyond those things. And I think that I needed something more superior to man because that's all I was ever compared to with God. It was, this and that. It's like, that God isn't superior to me. The
I was told
grace-
grace is a prayer. You say it before you eat. No,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
My
who's gonna say
mentor,
grace?
my mentor, who was a navigator for like 50 some odd years, and he was a wonderful guy. His heart was right. He was a wonderful guy, but he taught me back before I understood at least a little bit of what grace was like. He had this thing called the wheel of grace, and the rim of the wheel was grace, and it had like 4 or 5 spokes in it, and each one of those spokes was a way you get grace. One of them was prayer, one of them was fasting, one of them was service, and if you want grace, here's how you do it. And I in the title of what you said, Sheri and I, what we're talking about, what is grace and how do you do it? Well, you don't do it. you can't do it. You can't get it. You can't earn it. You can't achieve it. The only doing it, at least from my perspective, is Christ in me doing it as me. Because in my mind, in my natural temperament, I would tend to be like you talked about when somebody cuts me off in traffic. It's only Christ in me and God's grace that gives me the ability.
Holds you back. It holds you back.
It gives me the supernatural ability, like Bill's roller skating. It gives me the supernatural ability to go, okay, I'm not in that big a hurry. There's who knows what kind of day that person has had, whatever. Life's way too short to get my blood pressure up 50 points because somebody cut me off in traffic. Now, that's what Jesus does as me. Occasionally, it seems like Jesus takes a coffee break, and in those times,
that's on you, Paul. That's not on Jesus.
That's on me. Yeah. He really doesn't. It just seems like it to me.
So, what do you mean you can't get it? What is that? What do you mean you can't get grace and you can't do grace? I mean, when I say I'm doing grace, it means that I'm really trying to act in a method of grace. I don't want to say graceful because I'm a klutz, but it's, when I'm trying to act in grace, when I'm trying to act in love, even in difficult situations, I think I'm doing grace then. Are you saying I'm not? What do you mean by that? I don't think you can,
and not to take words out of your mouth, you can't do grace. You have to be grace.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense.
Anything we attach as a do, right, is just do. Mike and I we have the same mind. Yeah, so it is. It's if we're efforting for anything, if we feel that it's a burden, even to our bodies, our minds, our soul, anything. Now, I'm not saying work, because it's different between like, doing something like there's action. I don't want us to take action out of it. The spirit, the intent behind of it should be effortless, full of those spirit things that Paul talked about that are, burst forth from love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. There are no law against these things, right? That means it's total grace. When you effortlessly respond and you don't even feel like you're doing anything, but that action is flowing effortlessly and you're like, what? Why am I giving the coat off my back to somebody trying to rob me? That makes no logical, reasonable sense. In fact, that's what a term I love Robert Capon uses, vulgar. It's vulgar grace. Hitler in heaven is a vulgar idea. That's the essence of grace. And it's shocking. It's honestly, it makes you feel a little not cool about things because
what does that reveal then? If that's not cool for you, if Hitler's in heaven, what's going on? I am so much better.
Yeah, it's full ego.
And then
full on ego.
Yeah, it's full
I tell
ego.
you what, if and my concept of heaven has changed too, but when I get to heaven, if Hitler's not there, I'm going to be really disappointed in God. I mean, the God I know
would have rocked me 5 years ago. And now it's like, I get it. I get it because that is the expansive grace. It's the grace that I want to tap into. It's knowing that I don't know all.
So Sheri, that just reveals something to you and your guests and to everyone, that there is a journey of growing each step, and we're not done it. So 5 years ago, you had a hard time with it, but today there's a softness towards that. You're going to probably have a lot more mercy to somebody who is you 5 years ago that you meet today, because you'll say, I've been on the journey. You're not going to be as harsh with them. You're going to actually show grace.
You'll actually see Christ in them, even in the worst of them. And that messes you up when you see your enemy, again, getting into these things that, you all of a sudden start seeing how Jesus said things from a different angle, and you see Christ in them, even in their really bad space. I mean, it's that toys with your heart, that toys with your head, and all of a sudden you have compassion and you have empathy and you have a desire to see them redeemed and restored to their true identity in Christ.
What did Richard Murray say? He had a post about that. He said he's starting to see the face of Jesus in those who are confronting him or arguing against him. Did you see that post?
Yeah.
It's just like a one sentence. It's like, wow, that it means your heart is changing to being who you actually already are. But there's a lot of clutter in the way. So it's kind of cool.
That's my current understanding. That's the telltale sign that you are growing in grace. You're starting to see Christ in everybody, no matter what they look like, act like, feel, what their beliefs are, what their sexual orientation is, what politics. When you begin to see Christ in everybody, that's a sure sign that, well, I don't know exactly. It's a good sign.
Well, do you ever get excited? Like that happens to me once in a while. This grace hits me that I didn't ask for the grace to hit me, but suddenly there was a gracious response to somebody, and I was excited afterwards, thinking, "Where did that come from? That was cool." Oh man, you're good at what you do. It's like it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You can't plan it. You can't organize it. And I think, Sheri, you were talking about this at the very beginning. How do we do grace? You can't. Grace lives in and wants to flow out of us. It's like telling a peach tree to grow a peach. Do you in the middle of the night when it's all foggy, do you hear the tree going, trying to squeeze out a peach? No.
Well, in my teenage years, I did.
Yeah, one of the words that we've tossed around some is religion, and that obviously can mean a lot of things to different people. To me, religion means any attempt on our part to gain or maintain a right relationship with God. And so if we're trying to do grace in order to get brownie points with God, or to prove that we're a, quote, good Christian, unquote, or to try to be like Christ or whatever, if we're trying to do that, then it's not grace. It's religion. It's us trying to do something to gain or maintain a right relationship with God, when in fact, in truth, we were given that right relationship with God by grace before the beginning of time.
Right.
Ephesians 1 specifically says, because of God's great love and his grace, he included us in Christ before the beginning of time. So all by his love and grace. So anytime we try to get what we already have, then we're working at it. And that's why I said, up front, if you're trying to do grace, it's not grace. Now, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Okay, let me stop you there because I'm a little bit confused. So again, I wanted to have this show because I don't know. Okay, so let me just make that clear. I really wanted to learn from you guys. So I had a situation that was a very difficult situation, and I needed to reach out to someone who I don't like. And in order to communicate with her, I needed to step back and say, how can I approach this with love? It's a very difficult situation. It's a legal issue on top of it. And how can I do this? And I thought, if I was in this situation, I would want grace on me. And so this is the way that I'm going to practice grace. I'm going to tell her everything that needs to happen. I'm going to assure her that this is what's going to happen. And if not, this is going to be the consequences. But a heads up, this is what's happening. That was the most grace I could muster in such a situation.
Poor girl.
So doesn't that mean that I was doing grace? I mean, when I'm trying to embody grace and I'm trying to live according to grace, isn't that doing grace?
Can I be a bad guy?
Sure.
No.
I thought I was going to have to answer that.
That is a question. So tell me why.
I mean, here's what we do. And listen, I think as humans, this is why grace is so difficult. And it is, because I don't do it very well all the time. Do it, right? I don't do it very well all the time. Anytime we put a stipulation, you said it was a legal matter, and this is what's going to happen if you do something, and I had to put boundaries, and we put bindings. Bindings is another word for religion. We do law. That's what we do. All of us, all the time. We ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Call it the tree of law, call it the tree of morality, call it the tree of ethics, call it whatever you want. That's what we do. That's not who we are. Our essence isn't that. A 2-year-old doesn't demand you. Well, that's probably a bad example.
Yes, they do.
Right? Grace is the one that sacrifices itself to a point that you just go, no, don't. That you can't. No, Jesus, don't lay down your life for everybody. I mean, no. I mean, lay down your life for good people, or
That's not what Jesus did, though. Jesus
no, exactly. He didn't. He did it for everybody, right?
Yeah.
You don't take somebody who's sticking you up and saying, give me your money, give me your wallet, give me everything. Go, sure, here's my wallet. And while I'm at it, here's my code, here's my ATM, here's my PIN number. Why don't you come over and actually hang out in my house, eat all my food. Let me love you the way you were meant to be loved. Let me show you a place in a life that you don't even know you deserve, because I believe that you are worth it.
Okay,
pause. Everything.
Pause.
Yeah.
You just said it, that you do not deserve.
You haven't earned
that. Spring on that, because you just
know. Well, deserved's probably the wrong word. You haven't earned.
No, it's good. Somebody's asking.
Perfect. Yeah.
Deserved with your efforts, but you do deserve it by your identity of humanity and divinity that is intertwined within you as a person, as a life that matters.
Okay, so let's build on that analogy. Someone is holding me up. They have a gun to me. I'm not supposed to just lay down, even though it's supposed to turn the other cheek.
You have 4 of them.
Yeah. If I was, I don't even know the right word. If I was living in grace, I would say, let's go to have a meal. I would want to give him a hug. I mean, no?
It doesn't make sense, does it?
No. That's why, like I said, this whole grace thing is like
nothing logical about it. There is just nothing logical about it. In fact, Paul said it is foolish to the logic thinker, to the Greek, and he says it's a stumbling block to the religious, right? Or it's basically a hang up to anybody who practices legalism or religion. Grace will, if you try to process it logically, you'll fail. If you try to practice it as some form of holiness, you'll fail. It's not. It's something bigger than both those concepts.
That's what makes it godly, right?
Say that again?
That's what makes it godly.
Which?
Got grace. It's bigger than anything.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because here's the other part. Bill was talking about being grace. I'm going to read a Bible verse, if that's okay. But it's a good one. It's one that when I first saw this a number of years ago and somebody made me read it like extra slow, it drove me nuts. But in, I think it's Romans 5, verse 2, it says, through whom we also have obtained our introduction by faith into this grace in which we stand. Okay, this grace is a specific grace, and that grace is a person. We have been placed into Christ already. We don't realize that we have the capacity for that insane, irrational grace.
Yeah.
So you're talking about an irrational grace. And I don't want to spend too much time on those specific scenarios, but somebody just asked, what's grace to the non-churched world? Like, what is that? Like, unmerited favor is a good way to see it. You know, we're getting we're talking about grace clearly from a kind of a spiritual place, which is what this show is about. There's a spirituality here that's important. But even in the world, I do funerals, let's say, okay? I see grace happening all the time with the extra kindness being shown to those who are grieving. That is grace. You want a practical application? Right there. You be kind. Those kinds of things. I think that's a neat direction to head on.
There was, I agree. There was just someone just posted, describe grace for those who aren't Christians. I pretty much see examples of grace in those who aren't Christians. And many times people who call themselves Christians are the most judgmental, least graceful people I have ever encountered. So that might blow up some people's screens, but I want to go back to
every week we do it. Don't worry.
Yeah. I want to go back to that original question. You know, what do you do when somebody wrongs you, when all of that kind of stuff? I have another very simple answer for that. This is just for me. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very simple. I'm learning to just take a deep breath. Peace who lives in me. What do you want me to do right now? What do you want me to say? And then just, I use the acrostic STOP, S-T-O-P. For me, it's simply take off Paul and listen to grace in me. What do you, sometimes I'll hear run like hell, you get out of here. Or sometimes it's give them a hug, whatever it is. If I try to do grace to that person that's treating me rudely or hurting me or whatever, most of the time the outcome's not going to be good. And I'm not telling you I do this 100% of the time, but here's my goal. And here's what I try to do is I stop and I just listen to grace in me. So what do you want me to do? What do you want me to say? And, somebody's got a thing up right now. I think we need to be careful, especially in the situations of sexual assault here. Well, of course we do. We need to, we never excuse behavior that hurts people. I mean, we don't excuse that. We don't condone that. And at least what I'm seeing with my current understanding of grace is the Holy Spirit knows what's going on in that other person's life, knows what's going on in the whole situation with everything. We have the mind of Christ in us. I mean, it says that in your book. We have the mind of Christ in us. It says in your book in 1 Corinthians 1:30 that Christ is our wisdom. So if we want to know what to do, rather than trying to come up with what to do on ourselves, by ourselves, is ask Christ in you, grace in you. What do you want me to do right now? And then do that. That's what obedience is. We've been taught that obedience is following rules. Obedience is doing whatever grace, the Holy Spirit in you, asks you to do in any given moment for any specific person. We've been talking about God is good. Well, there are two Greek words for good. There's at least one, probably more, Hebrew word for good, but they all mean goodness or kindness. They can be translated either way. Kindness is goodness in action. You can be a good person, but if you have the ability to meet somebody's need where it's at, if you have that ability and don't do it, you may be good, but you're not being kind. Kindness is taking the ability that you have and giving it to a person who's in need, even when they don't deserve it, because, I won't go into the deserve thing, but, it could be, somebody who's, comes around a corner after I get out of a restaurant and puts a gun in my face and wants my wallet. It could be that person's mom or wife is dying because they don't have enough money to do whatever. And the Holy Spirit might say, give them your billfold. It's only money. You got more money. I mean, and I'll give you more money. Give it. Now that's a stark example, but I'm just learning. And again, I'm not saying I have arrived or by any means, or that I do this every time, but I have found that it never fails.
So can I jump in for a sec?
Yeah,
Of course.
You talked about kindness and good, and you tied it to a situation. I think we can get run off the rails real quick if we talk about a situation like being held up with a gun. Now we're setting a new precedent, a new law, a new principle of how we're supposed to act. And now we got goofy religious people giving in a really weird way, creating harmful situations.
Correct.
It's like a sexual assault. I was sexually assaulted. We talked about this in a program on forgiveness not too long ago. I think Anna. Is Anna the one that was in our group?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, Anna. So in that situation, she can be good and kind, but she can kindly take that person to court and sue their donkey off. Like hold them accountable. There's a way to do this, forgiving them and be gracious and hold them accountable in public. There's a disconnect in churchianity that says, hey, you can't mix those two. Oh, yes, you can. And maybe we don't know exactly how, but if we set a precedent, here's how you're supposed to act in certain situations, we've become a new legalistic flow.
We've created law.
Yes.
Law. And here's the twist.
I saw that happening in the discussion. I want to make sure.
Yeah, I think Mike nailed it. And I think this is the twist of grace, which again, it's so irrational and bass backwards. It really is. It fools with our minds in some ways, because the second we think we have it'll pivot on us and move, and that's okay. It's a dancer, right? It's always in motion. And the thing about grace that's just so aggravating, I mean that in the most wonderful of ways, is that grace is what makes us who we really are. Law, in any way, any shape, any form, even if we think it's the best thing for our mind, right? If we think, don't murder, don't murder, don't murder, don't murder, I've never murdered. We're actually setting the bar so low in our being that we don't really understand that anger in our heart is the same thing as murder.
Well, Jesus called it out on the Sermon on the Mount.
In other words, we miss the point that grace in one moment says, give them your wallet. Grace in another moment says, protect your wife. Grace doesn't do one thing. Grace is dynamic and totally spastic in the most beautiful way.
And it doesn't look religious.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
So to tie into the show, with the one that you were on, Mike, on forgiveness, grace is what forgives, right?
Yes, and forgiveness does not mean a bunch of other things too. I think it's these terms that have to be better defined because we attach religious definitions to them, and the religious definitions are legalistic. They bind you. So now you don't have room to think for yourself or see more hope-filled perspectives.
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking I should send Anna a link and get her on this show since she has so many questions.
If she fits in, bring her in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And forgiveness, just like Mike said, we tend to tie this so much, again, against conditions. And I want to kind of pull it back to that. And it's so difficult for us as humans. And so this is the paradox, because I think that's the word we all need to rest in, is paradox. Is on one hand, we are, again, existent. We are physically bound into a world of law, whether we like it or not. There's physical laws. If I go jump off a 2-story building, I'm going to break my legs, more than likely. The law of gravity is going to bring me down. But in God's kingdom, the quantum realm, the ether, the space between spaces, the love that exists that binds all creation together, those laws don't apply the same way. There's a transcendency there that says, listen, forgiveness inside of the fixed realm isn't indicative of what's going on in the greater realm that is taking this tapestry of madness and weaving it together into a mosaic of beauty, right? And so I think we have to be comfortable enough to rest in the paradox sometimes and realize that you can't box this in sometimes. We want an answer, and sometimes the answer isn't articulatable.
So people try to say that grace is a license to sin. Yeah. Right? That's a typical response. That, you're saying free grace, we're under grace, that means I can do whatever I want. Well, honestly, you can. My question is, do you know who you are? Right? That's a big one. So grace is not the permission slip to do wrong. It's the freedom to do all that is right. And so even I forget where it says, but true grace leads us to deny ungodliness. Like real grace will say no to the hurtful things. That's the purest opposite I've seen. Like, I don't know. It's not as complicated as we think. And like whoever it was who just wrote, Michelle said, we're trying to define grace like we're trying to define God. It's a mystery. It's a huge map. It's not a singular thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
and we're all coming from a human perspective, which puts, boxes on everything. From birth, basically, we put boxes on and we rely on our own understanding. I know this is a hot button issue, but it's something that really resonated with me. Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden thought that he was righteous. Osama bin Laden thought he was protecting his people. Osama bin Laden was retaliating for everything that the Americans has ever done. He really felt in the name of God that he was righteous. As Americans, we disagree, of course, right? So what is righteous?
I'm Canadian.
Okay, sorry. I forgot. It's always an international show. But yes, I mean, as an American, it's to not detach myself, and say, no, he was wrong. We're right. Grace comes in on that and says, that's where grace comes in and says, leave it not up to your own understanding. This is not beyond, he thought he was righteous. You think you are righteous. Grace brings everything together. Right?
Well, I think you just kind of nailed something hard, because he was living under a belief of who he thought God was.
Yeah.
And it was an incomplete concept, and so was mine. All of our concepts of who we think God is incomplete. When the religious world is caught up in defining and being the determinators of who God is, they start a denomination or a movement, right?
Yeah.
So it's happened. So when we make fun of Osama and see him as unrighteous and terrible thing, how can you do that? Even his faith is so awful. Wait a minute. Your judgment that you are producing onto him, you're doing the exact same thing. You have done a judgment. So this comes back to this whole idea of grace, that when the true grace of Christ that is in us already, when it starts to come out in a way that we can't even see coming, go, what is going on? And some people may even say, you're actually becoming a nice person, all that stuff, right? When that starts to happen, your perspective begins to change, because grace changes your eyesight.
That's right. Yeah, Osama bin Laden is a beloved child of God, made in the image of perfect love, who was so alienated and confused by the baggage and burdens of his upbringing that he was so lost that he felt the need to hurt others out of fear, right? For God. But when perfect love casts out fear, then we can only then start operating from that beingness of grace. We can't fear any situation that we may be in. And that's very unnatural to our mortality, our flesh, you want to call that, our carnal nature, whatever you want to say.
Ego, sure.
Or ego, right? When we realize that there is, Paul said it, oh death, where's your sting, right? He embraced death, as weird as that sounds. All the disciples did. All these guys were, except John, and even then, they were brutally martyred, right? Mm-hmm. And yet they forgave every single one of the people that were doing to that as they were dying, just as Christ did. That's how this message of Christianity, pure Christianity, not
not the Christian religion.
Not the religion that we see today, but that the very earliest church had. It wasn't built by wars and conquerors. It was built by 12 guys or 15 guys who basically laid down their life and said, I love you, as their murderers killed them.
That's radical.
That's very radical.
It's irrational. What the heck?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy to judge, right? That's why we do it all the time. It's so easy to judge. It's so easy to hate. You really have to have conscious thought in order to love and to be kind and to be compassionate, because it's just not innate in us, unfortunately.
But it is. That's the twist. It is.
Wow. Okay.
So much baggage on top of it, and that's what grace does.
Wow, that's good.
It plants that seed, and then you realize that that well, as Jesus said, the well of living water is in you, and you pop that cork, and all of a sudden it just starts taking over, and you do things that you're like, that doesn't make. Why am I doing this? This person hates me, or I hate this person. I shouldn't do this. This makes no sense whatsoever. I've given them 7 times and they screwed me over 7 times, but I'm going to let them screw me over 70 times because that's what grace does, and it doesn't make any darn sense.
Okay, so how do you walk in grace and not be a doormat?
Whew, that's tough.
That's a tough one. I think your background of definitions hinders that. I think, and I gotta be careful who I use as an example. So there are some more pacifistic denominations that are trained to be doormats and roll over. They won't fight, they won't do anything, whatever it is, and they mean what they're saying. But the doormat mentality could actually show an incomplete picture or belief of who you really are.
Yeah.
Right. You said something, Bill. In just a second. Can I bring up a David Hayward cartoon he just posted today?
Sure.
In light of what Bill just said, it says the best healing is when you realize you're not broken and don't need fixing. I thought, holy, this is back to identity. That's back to grace, the grace that's in you. Sorry, that was just, I couldn't help that. It was just so cool.
Yeah. Well, somebody just posted, somebody else said, even a wretch like me, and somebody else said, you're not a wretch. You weren't born a wretch. We weren't born wretches. I mean,
right.
Bad theology and a good song.
Son like me. I changed it to son, but you can say daughter or child.
Yeah. Yeah. And, well,
when I sing that song, I say saved a wretch, and I use the microphone like you. I mean, me. So anyway.
I'm not a wretch.
Back to your doormat comment. I think it is a tough one. And what we have to do is we have to grow in our own identity first. And sometimes there's going to be seasons of that. I think that's the other part of grace that I think can get people out of sorts is the idea of impatience. There are seasons, and this is going to sound crazy, maybe even in this group, and I don't mean it to, but I needed the evangelical church in my life, personally, me, for a season. I did. I know. Sure. I have grace for that. For me now, looking back at that kid who needed that season of structure and binding and protection to walk through some things that I wasn't ready for yet. I think as we grow in grace, there are seasons where we need protection. We need to be introspective, and we need to cast out things that are hurtful or harmful and protect ourselves from situations where we can be harmed, create boundaries, create borders, put on bindings for seasons, just like an AA member would. They go and they become religious, bound to the process of the 12 steps. But it's when that becomes legalized, and that's all you are defined as forever. I'm an addict. No, you're not an addict. Yeah. You are a beloved, free child of God who suffered from a brokenness, a sickness for a season. And my belief is that in the fullness of time, that's key, maybe not in this realm completely, you will be completely freed from that false identity and be brought into the true identity of who you are. You're not an addict. You are a beautiful child of God, but you don't become a doormat until you have maturated. And this sounds crazy, I know, to a point that abuse on you is no longer defining of who you really are. And the only reason I say it like that is because that's the image that Jesus showed me. At some point, he did become the doormat. And in becoming the doormat, he showed a love and a beauty there that has literally changed all of creation, in my opinion. And that does, again, it doesn't make sense. He was so secure in his identity, though, it didn't affect him like it does someone who's not there yet. Does that make sense? I don't want that to come across.
Well, even he protested. Even he said, God, are you going to make me do this? Really? You're going to make me do this?
Yeah.
So, but I think that one of the key elements in all of this is the lack of love for yourself, right? It's always love others as you love yourself. But if you can't love yourself, then you can't love others. So I think that grace has to be a part of what we give ourselves, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had to forgive myself for so many things, forgive others for things. And I think without that grace, I wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I agree. You have to start with grace for yourself.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I came across a definition I have loved for years. It comes from Paul Anderson Walsh in England. He defines grace in an acronym that goes, God's ridiculous agape, captivating everyone. Mm-hmm. Basically, grace wins, love wins. And when we wake up to the reality that we're captivated by his love, grace begins to take root in a more practical awareness, and then begins the journey of maturing in us. So I think it's pretty exciting.
I think it gives us something to strive for.
Sure. Yeah, because there's a maturity level, or striving not to.
What was that, Bill?
Or resting.
Resting. Yeah. That's the cool. Grace is not an effort, self-effort of trying to achieve something, but rather there's the effort of trusting Christ in us. If you're going to put effort into something, put it into the work of trusting Jesus in you. That's the work. It doesn't mean we sit around and, so when's this grace going to come? I'm going to eat some potato chips, and once it comes, I might recognize it. That's not like that at all. Grace is in us.
I feel offended by that.
there's an active involvement and participation. Yeah. Just like the Trinity is a participatory relationship, we're included in that, and that's, to me, the glue of grace.
Yeah, do you have to work to love your children?
No. Well,
I mean, not.
What?
I got a 16 and an 18-year-old. Yeah. I know.
When they're younger, here we go.
I mean, but in reality,
you never love. You don't have to try to love them to like them. You have to try.
That's it. Healthy, and I say this in all seriousness. Healthy people don't have to effort loving their children. Healthy people don't have to effort to do things for their children. Where I mentioned right before, we're about to move my son to actually down near Sheri for college. He's 18. He's going to USF, and my wife, I love her to death, but she gets a little carried away sometimes with these opportunities to get this, and he needs a caddy for his shower, and he needs this and he needs this, and that's grace. It's just this effortless overflow of hyper abounding joy and favor and provision and whatever, because she just can't help herself. And that's what God does to us first. And then when we start to reflect who we are, which is just like him, we start to do that for others. And it's easy for the people that we effortlessly love. But the more people we begin to effortlessly love, the more people we do that for. And it's funny, that's the thing that actually makes them do the same thing. It's not condemning them, saying, you need to get right with God. You need to buy people more stuff, and you need to. No, it's the opposite. It's the effortless. Hey, I love you. Here, I bought you a coffee today. I don't know you. I know. And then they do that. It sounds, but that's what, and if we as a community of believers in Christ and beyond that, unbelievers, it doesn't matter who you are, begin to respond to people in that way, it happens. But the second we try to legalize it, put a law on it, put a stamp on it, and hold people accountable against it, we ruin it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense, because that's what we as humans do and want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It definitely shows our humanity.
And here's the twist. That's okay too.
Yeah. We're here for that. We're here
okay.
for a human experience.
Right? So when we screw it up, Grace is still there.
Well, we are at the top of the hour. That flew by, and I can't wait to continue this conversation in VIP. I want to thank you, gentlemen, so much. By the way, this is the first time that we've had an all-male panel, so I want to thank you so much for being here.
I see a female there.
Well, I'm not the panel. I'm the
I
host.
guess these days you can't ask.
Well, don't talk about Mike like that.
You're the panel. I'm the hostess. So David made sure. David, the link will appear in Fireside VIP in about 2 minutes. So you'll be able to link in there. Anna, definitely jump over. I'd love to talk to you. But I'm going to send you guys backstage. Thank you so very much. First, I want to walk through. Paul, do you have any final thoughts, or where can people find you?
Well, I'm all over Facebook, and you can. I have a podcast called Grace with Paul Gray, which I've interviewed both of these friends on, and it's wherever you get podcast. Grace with Paul Gray, appropriate for. No, it's called Grace to All with
right.
Paul Gray. Grace to All with Paul Gray. Yeah, my books are on Amazon, and I'd love to connect with people.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, my name's Bill Thrasher. You can find me again mostly on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I don't post there nearly as often. I run a community there, private group, a safe group called the Jesus Purpose Community. I don't hold back there at all, but it is a Jesus focused group where we just challenge the status quo, and we talk about topics just like this all the time, mostly in written, in Facebook posting kind of form.
Fantastic. Mike?
All I'd say is the easiest is look up Michael Zenker on YouTube, and you'll hear my weekly Sunday church services that are actually kind of okay. And then I do a weekly program called Still Growing in Grace, because we're still all growing grace. No one's arrived. And we just talk through the topics like you are here, which is great, because I think the more we have great conversations like this, the more fun it is. So that's the easiest place.
I love this show, and I love you guys for showing. I gotta post this up, because this I just think is absolutely hilarious. I'm an honorary man today.
Hey, I saw that. That was awesome. Oh man, that was fun. I hope you enjoyed that. It was, again, really fun listening and watching with you. I see a number of you are watching online, and just to see and hear the conversation again, like it could go in so many directions. We need another Grace Conference type thing, just to again tackle all the spokes in the wheel of what is grace. I'm looking forward to that. So let's say hello to a few folks. We got Sandra in the UK watching, Linda down in Walsburg. Hey, Linda. And Jim down in Windsor. Woohoo! Marianne in Australia. You're just heading to bed now, I think, right? Yes. Fantastic. Listen, this has been a lot of fun, and it's been a whole hour, and I could have just kept listening. It's been great stuff. So we're looking forward to having more. Next week, we might continue the series on heaven. What is heaven? We might do a quick detour. You never know what happens with the topics, but I'm going to connect with Richard and Bill. Otherwise, I've got some Marianne and Andre Rabe interviews to share with you, and I'm hoping to record a bunch more interviews soon. Stay tuned to, I'm working on a conference idea on healing life's hurts through understanding forgiveness, and having a panel of people speak to the topic from their perspectives. I've done a series over and over again on that topic, and it's more of a teaching course almost. But this conference, I want to expand and have different teachers share from their lens. And Marianne and Andre Rabe have already agreed to say and said yes, they'd like to be part of that. And I'm reaching out to a few other people as well. And hopefully we can have something by mid to end of November, have an online event. Stay tuned for that. I'm saying it to force myself to get going on this too. So hold me accountable. I want to get this rolling. So that's all I got for today. You guys have a fantastic day, and we will catch you next week. Thanks for watching. Share if you like this, and we'll catch you next time. Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.